very fortunate to have really great co-chairs as well as great members. But I'm going to ask Sarah to put up one slide. I'd like to just talk very briefly about the civil society aspects of the coalition. We've been working on that a little bit, and this will all be posted. In fact, while we're doing that, let me speak about something else, which is I certainly encourage you all to make use of the website, which I, as a layman, I'm always amazed at how well it seems to have turned out, but it has a lot of helpful information. Turning to the civil society engagement, as many of you know, the original ministerial indicated that the coalition should reach out to civil society as part of the effort. And we know there's a lot of factors to balance, but we believe we have at least a good roadmap to do this. I won't read this whole thing in detail, but essentially there will be some national dialogues between governments that wish to do this in January and February. There'll be a global civil society forum on synthetic drugs in January. I think another thing you'll find interesting is the website will be an opportunity for a lot of sharing of views. Then there'll also be other options. But with that, why don't I go ahead and turn it over to our very distinguished co-chairs, Ms. Monica Ashish Batra and Mr. Dulat Makametra-Kimov, to lead us into the session. Thank you.
A very good morning. Am I audible?
And Monica, you need to be in the English channel, please. If you can click the icon of the globe and select the English channel. Thank you so much.
Да-да, доброе утро всех участников.
Is it okay now?
Good morning to everybody. Good morning, I hear everybody.
Is it okay now? Am I audible?
Monica, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Respected co-chair, Mr. Dulat, Deputy Head, Department of Countering Drugs Crime, Ministry of Internal Affairs of Kazakhstan. Dear Bill, we have met, of course, and dear participants from the member states. A very good morning to all of you. Once again, I welcome all of you in this another interactive session of Subgroup 1, which has primarily focused on the issues related to the manufacturing of synthetic drugs and their precursors. Last time we met and had elaborate deliberations on the illicit manufacturing of synthetic drugs and their precursors. Today's presentations, I'm sure, would take us further on this. I was just going through the agenda points and have seen that there are some good, insightful and in-depth presentations which we would be seeing. I think all the countries need robust mechanisms and infrastructure to contain any illicit manufacturing of drugs and their precursor chemicals. The pilferage of seized drugs and controlled substances is again a major concern. Moreover, the diversion is also of dual precursor chemicals is also posing a major challenge to drug law enforcement agencies. To stop the pilferage, India has envisaged comprehensive guidelines for the pre-trial as well as post-trial disposal of the seized narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. India has made special provisions for pre-trial disposal of seized drugs and chemicals to avoid any pilferage during their storage, while the case is still sub judice in the court of law. Accordingly, the guidelines have also been adjusted, keeping in view the changing drug trafficking scenario. Further, to contain any diversion of the precursor chemicals, India has enacted a special law known as the NDPS, Regulation of Controlled Substances Order, in 2013. Under this law, India regulates the manufacturing, storage, distribution, consumption, sale, export and import of 27 controlled substances. The laboratories also play a very significant role in the identification and certification of the seized drugs and precursor chemicals in the country. The central government of India also allocates special funds for scheme of assistance to state to strengthen and establish laboratories and strengthening the forensic capabilities of the state agencies. While talking about the law and the facilities available, monitoring, information sharing, and early warning and risk awareness are also essential keys to contain illicit manufacture of synthetic drugs and diversion of the precursor chemicals. We need to closely monitor and regulate the chemicals which pave the way for manufacture of designer precursor chemicals by tweaking their chemical configurations to produce synthetic drugs. We can also share the best practices and technologies in establishing a well-equipped laboratories and monitoring mechanism, particularly for the precursor chemicals. I feel that this is the best platform where we can share and learn from each other in formulating the solution which may address this global issue. With those words, thank you so much from my side, and I would request for the meeting to go forward. Thank you.
Доброе утро.
Good morning, my dear colleagues and brothers in arms in our important thing to fight drugs. The topic we want to discuss today is very important. It's a very big problem. How do we see in every separate region the production of drugs well developed, and markets in many countries are provided with their local production? As Monica said, with regards to the work which India conducts, struggling with all those illicit substances and precursors, I would like to use an example of Kazakhstan to give you some statistics, because we already have about 25 labs which work in using this opportunity. I would like to ask if there are any colleagues here from China. I'm not sure. I'm asking the moderator, do we have Chinese participants in this conference?
We do not.
Нет.
Thank you.
Все, спасибо.
Okay,
Просто
thank you.
у нас зарегистрированы факты, где поступление
We have registered cases when precursors were delivered to our country from China, and we're trying to use diplomatic channels
выйти на связь с нашими коллегами.
to get in touch with our colleagues in China and try to solve this problem and to see how does it happen that this chemical produced and delivered from China. Once again, greetings to everybody. And I pass the torch to Keith Norman, who has a presentation about utilization and work with synthetic drugs, chemicals used in production of drugs. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Okay, let's see if this will work. Let's see if I can share my screen. Come on. Sorry, it's taken a while to share.
Take your time. We are very familiar with this issue in the era of Zoom. Thank you. We're very happy you're here and sharing your deep expertise.
Come on.
And we can see your screen. And Dr. Norman, you are muted. I will ask you to unmute. And for everybody's information, we experienced that issue earlier. When somebody's sharing the screen, for some reason, the microphone is blocked. So Dr. Norman would like to test the audio.
Yep.
Go ahead, please. We can hear you.
Let's try again. I'll just share screen. Do that one. Share that. Right. Okay, so let's try again. So, all good? You can hear me?
Go ahead.
Sweet. So, I'm currently working out of Bangkok as the Scientific Affairs Officer. What we're currently seeing within the region is the global approach for disposal is pretty much open air burns. Now, the issues we get on this one, and you can see from these lovely images, we've got contamination to the environment. It's not a complete combustion. We are getting contaminated to the air, the ground, and the water. So these are all live images. What we're looking at on the right-hand side was actually where a disposal had occurred within the region. And we've actually now got the remnants of where the disposal was, and then low-lying groundwater, which then means we've got contamination to the environment long-term. The 3 countries that we're looking at in the region for doing the country assessments, 2 of them were funded under INL funding and 1 was funded under the Australian funding. So we have Laos, Cambodia, and the Philippines. The issues faced of what we're looking at in the region is the volume of the seized material, the long-term storage of the materials, the abilities to actually identify the materials, and the legal framework around being able to dispose of the assets and dispose of these materials. So we'll look at Cambodia. What we have here on this map are the locations of the 21 current declared storage locations and also ex-Clan Lab locations within the country. So you can see that they're fairly well dispersed. Cambodia has an issue where we've got approximately 600 tons of precursors that were seized. So we're ranging from about 150 tons of ammonium hydroxide down to 200 kilos of THF, and it's distributed across the country. So we've now got 600 tons of material that we've got to get rid of. These are just the chemicals, and then we've also got some chemical waste as well. This is without considering any of the drugs that have been seized. The storage that we have on here, they have been stored where they've been seized. So it could be appropriate, it might not be appropriate. And we've got large amounts. The issue on this one is that the locations and where they're actually being stored is actually some of them are good and they're remote and they're isolated and they're away from populations. Others, when we went and visited, there was literally a kindergarten in the house and the properties behind. With the long-term storage, we have issues with the stability of the containers. So I'm not sure how far it comes through. In this image here, you can see this haze sitting across the containers. Well, that was actually a haze of hydrogen chloride gas where we couldn't actually enter the property. And hopefully this video will work. So as you can see on here, this is the hydrogen chloride gas evolving from out of one of the containers. And what was happening was, in the morning when you turn up, the sun was not on the top of the container. As the day heated up, the sun came through, landed on the top of the container and basically caused it to evaporate. So we've now got contamination in the actual building. So not only do we have a hazardous chemicals, but we've now created a contaminated site which needs to be remediated afterwards. If we move to the Philippines, the issue that we've got in the Philippines is the long-term storage. So these are 3 images from their clandestine laboratory storage area. They've seized the items. They don't get many clan labs in the Philippines, but their process for actually getting rid of items is incredibly slow. An example on this is, how long do you keep an item? We had items sitting in this warehouse which are 16 years old, and there's probably others. The issue we have on this one is the mechanism by which they're being stored. They have no evidential value because you will guarantee that there's cross-contamination between cases. There's guaranteed cross-contamination because of the way in which they're stored. There's guaranteed cross-contamination because there was actually a cat living in there. There was rodents running around. So we've now got physical transfer of material. The issue that we've got in Laos. So there has been 2 reported seizures of propionyl chloride, one in March of 2020 and one in July of 2020. So we've got a total of about 91 tons reportedly of propionyl chloride. We need to know what the actual compound is. The mechanism for identification, as far as we've been able to ascertain, and we don't have any laboratory results, is based upon what's actually written on the container. Well, it could be anything. The issue that we hit when we're starting to look for it is we need to make sure that we've got clear identification of what the material is, and then the intended synthetic process that it could be used in. So for propionyl chloride, there is a considerable issue we've got on this one. It could be used as a manufacturer for methamphetamine, or it could be used in the production of fentanyl. Two very different drugs, two very different risk profiles for the response and society. Where it fits, and I'm going to put a little bit of chemistry out because I'm a chemist. So we've got the propionyl chloride, and these are the synthetic routes where it could fit. So it could go through to make P2P, it could go through to make ephedrine, or as I showed down the bottom, it could be used to making fentanyl. These are very, very, especially for the methamphetamine, these are long, extended processes that need to be done. There's a lot of chemistry that needs to be done. Is it physically and commercially viable for it to be done this way? I don't know, but it's extensive chemistry. If we're now looking and saying, well, and it's attributed to the manufacture of fentanyl, it changes the risk profile within the entire region that, fentanyl is being produced, but it's not being seen in seizures, so it's not backed up. What it could be, and this has been something that's been seen in the region, it could be phenyl chloride. Now, phenyl chloride for the MD route, this has been seen regularly within the region. I've attended labs within the region. We've done disposals within the region of these sorts of things as well. The other issue we have from here as well is that depending on the mechanism and depending on what the chemical is, the disposal route that we are going to follow changes considerably, because the risks posed due to phenyl chloride are considerably different to the risk posed due to propionyl chloride. So we need an established, capable laboratory to be able to do the analysis. Again, where does it matter? So if we're looking at the options for disposal, we need to know what the material is prior to actually trying to get rid of it. We need to be able to identify what of the options we have for an appropriate environmentally compliant mechanism for disposal. So the way forward, we need to identify options for disposal of chemicals back into industry. So if we look at the Cambodian experience and we have 600 tons of chemicals, well, most of that is actually commercial consumable chemicals. So we've got 150 tons of ammonium hydroxide, 130 odd tons of concentrated hydrochloric acid. Then rather than actually spending the effort and putting the effort into actually disposing of these and rendering them, neutralizing them, is it not better, or is there an option to return it back into commercial industry in an appropriate mechanism such that it can be used for industrial processes? This would be aimed at a primary industry. So we'd be looking at the mining industry or something in very, very gross agriculture. The reason I state this is because we're not going to take the time and effort to do a certificate of competency and certificate of compliance on what the actual chemicals are, because it would take too much effort. We need to develop the process that allows for rapid disposal of seized materials. Listening to what has been enacted in India, this is perfect. We don't want things sitting around for a long time. We don't need exhibits sitting there for 16 years. We have to enhance the capabilities within the countries for detection and identification of the seized materials. We need to support the laboratories that are actually doing the analysis. And this is both the forensic laboratory, but also the environmental laboratories, so that we know that we're environmentally compliant. And then we also need to establish the legal frameworks for this to occur. So the limitation in the Philippines is not so much the number of exhibits we've got, but it's actually agreement from out of the legal attorneys to actually allow for these items to be disposed of. And it's also the need, or the constant requirement, or the constant request from the judiciary that they actually want exhibits in court, which poses an undue risk to everyone by moving the exhibits, be this an item from a Clan lab or the actual drugs themselves. We have to establish for the court process that we need to be able to just provide active imagery or video footage of what we've got. Moving on from that as well is we need to look and move away from, when we're doing the disposals, that we need physical presence at the disposal site. In the same way in which we are happy to do interviews and video footage and video feeds from court processes from jails where we're interviewing the offender, why can't we do that for disposal? Have law enforcement as your at the disposal site, but literally do exactly what we're doing now and do a Zoom call in for all of your other witnesses so they can view what's going on. It's going to save time, it's going to save effort, and it's also going to reduce the potential for exposure of people to something that could be toxic. So this is the way in which we're trying to move forward within the region. We've successfully, we've undertaken the review of the 3 countries. We have reports that will be issued before the end of the year, hopefully, or be completed before the end of the year, which will then detail exactly what we've got. And then it's the move forward on how we're going to do this. It's not, each country has very similar, they've got similar issues, but different issues, if that makes sense. It's just the volumes that we've got in which way we're going to try and dispose of it. But the overlay of the way in which we need to do it is to just get people to work together and to actually sort of start to think about the way in which we need to move forward. Easy. Thank you for your time. Brian, I think it's you.
Да, огромное спасибо.
Thank you very much, Dr. Norman, for a very useful and interesting information. It's very vital, very important. And before we move to the next presentation, I would really love to say thank you to our hosts and to the Bureau for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs for the help they do for the conference, which took place in March. And the course of which was offered for the police officers and also for law enforcement officers. I wanted to say that those trainings and those conferences are very useful for our colleagues, for our officers. We have a new technology, new devices. So that's why I really want to express my gratitude. And I would love to introduce our next speaker, Brian Escamilla, forensic chemist from the company NES, and he is working within the Colombo plan. The Colombo plan is the plan we know. We really like to collaborate with the colleagues from that organization, and I'm really looking forward to the second presentation by Brian. Please, thank you.
All right, can everybody hear me? I'm assuming I'm up next here.
Please go ahead.
Okay, let me pull my screen up and see if I can.
And Brian, my apologies, you need to be in the English channel, please. If you can click the icon of the globe on your screen, select the English channel and continue. Thank you.
How's that? We good?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Oops. Is that popping up? Can you guys see that?
No, we cannot see your screen yet. You need to click the green button, share screen, select the option for the screen, and click the share button.
All right. There we go.
And we can see your PowerPoint presentation. You may want to move it into the slide mode, and you are welcome to continue.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. My name is Brian Escamilla. I'm with the Colombo plan, and we were going boots on the ground in the country to train a lot of the narcotic teams into doing entry into these clandestine laboratories. So kind of at the other end of the spectrum where Dr. Keith Norman was talking about, these are the entry teams that are going in to take down, dismantle, sample these sites. And so some of the objectives we had, we wanted to go into country and find out what they have training in those areas. So we had to do some research and specifically customize the training for each of the countries that we went into. We then took the material, put it into their native tongue. So we converted the PowerPoints. We do have field guides laminated that they take in. We had all that converted over along with translation. And in some of the countries where they were lacking the equipment to do these entries, the personal protective equipment, the respirators, the cartridges, air monitoring equipment, we supplied that equipment and then trained them on it so these teams can safely go into these laboratories and begin the process of dismantling, sampling, assessing, and taking down these sites. So the countries that we went to this year are right here: Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Honduras, Colombia, Guatemala, and South Africa. So we went into each of these countries. We worked out ahead of time the training that was needed. We got together with the State Department to identify what was trending specifically in the countries, what the threats are, and what the high likelihood, if these guys were to go into a laboratory, what would they be running into? And this not only goes with physical hazards and the chemical hazards, but what goes airborne, with the intention of these guys taking air monitoring measurements to make the decision of a go, no go into these laboratories for their own safety. So every country had a little bit different trend going on. Kazakhstan was seeing a big influx in the alpha PVP and mephedrone labs. Now we obviously customized the program to go over the manufacturing processes, what to look for as far as commercial products or precursor chemicals that would be coming in to identify specifically what type of lab these guys have entered into. And then from that, we had them go through and identify with their air monitoring equipment the levels of contaminants that would possibly be airborne, how to interpret those results. And so the equipment they were giving, the respirators, the chemical suits, boots, and gloves, they were trained on that equipment. We fit tested them for the respirators while we were in country, and then we trained them on the limitations of that equipment also. We did not have an opportunity to get these guys SCBAs, and so establishing the criteria for when to pull the team out if things have gone airborne or if things have exceeded the cartridge's capacity to actually filter these compounds, we gave them the training on when to pull these teams out for their own safety reasons. So in Kazakhstan, we did cover the basic Clan Lab investigative techniques. And then we also gave them site safety officer training, which would be more in charge of the supervisor on the site and making decisions out in the field, again, for the team safety as far as what they need to be wearing. And again, the no-go decisions that would be taking place out there. So again, we went through and trained a good handful of these guys on the laboratories themselves, identifying the unknowns and the gross characteristics of some of the material they'd be working with. For Nigeria, they were having a problem with methamphetamine and specifically by the red phosphorus method. Now, they also had a problem with Captagon out there, but ironically, the Captagon, which is originally supposed to be amphetamine and theophylline, is just a conglomeration of a bunch of bath salt drugs, ketamine, ecstasy, and some other compounds that are mixing together to mimic Captagon. But we had to kind of gear the training up in the presentations for that. And along with the hazards with going into a red phosphorus lab and some of the airborne toxins that would be present. The air monitoring equipment, we trained them on it and what to look for in certain gases and vapors that would be coming off the reactions, or the chemical containers themselves. As you saw in Dr. Keith Norman's pictures there, without even synthesis, we do have evolution of vapors and gases that can occur from the chemical containers. And so we wanted to make sure that the teams are fully trained on pulling the air monitoring equipment out and taking the samples and making the decision of a go, no go into the laboratories. So in Nigeria, we did cover the basic school. We equipped these guys with the materials they would need to go into a laboratory, to dismantle it, what to look for. In this case, and it was applicable to Nigeria, we actually did a live methamphetamine cook. So they could see the process of the manufacturing, because often a lot of the students don't get that opportunity. So we did perform a live methamphetamine cook for these guys, and that was well appreciated by them. So for Honduras, obviously with the Central America, we have a lot of the cocaine, a lot of the cultivation problems, period, but cocaine cultivation seems to be not only the in thing down there, but the extraction laboratories that go into processing the coca leaves and extracting out the cocaine. Now, recently they did have a big seizure. It was a large container that was confiscated. Once they got a search warrant for it, they went in and identified vials of diverted fentanyl that they were seizing at that site. So in a lot of our trainings, we have been including the fentanyl, the handling of it. And ironically, in the Central America there, we have a lot of the version of the medicinal stuff, which is the fentanyl in liquid form, but it's secured in vials. And it's usually fine for them unless those vials break. So with the Hondurans, we did go through and we did a Clan Lab Basic, which we trained them, equipped them, gave them the air monitoring equipment and the necessary training that would be needed to safely go in and monitor the atmosphere, and if need be, when to pull the teams for safety reasons. So we went on to Colombia. Colombia, we identified that there was cocaine cultivation and the extraction laboratories, and then they have a drug down there called 2C. So 2C, it's got a street name of liquid cocaine. 2C was actually, if you go back in time, was actually supposed to be 2CB. It was an old Shulgin drug, a hallucinogenic compound. But recently, 2C has now been a mixture of a bunch of different bath salt drugs and other materials, including the fact that they found fentanyl vials that were medicinally being diverted onto the street. And they were putting the fentanyl in with the 2C also. So we did cover a lot of the fentanyl handling, hazards, Narcan, and all the other things that go into the fentanyl training with these guys also. So,
excuse me, Brian.
Yes.
Acting as a little bit of a moderator. I want just, if we're probably a little pressed for time, but and what you're saying is really very vital for what we're doing, but if just to be aware that we're probably going to have to move along pretty soon. Thank you.
I'll speed it up. So Guatemala, cocaine, heroin, cannabis operations, they were seeing methamphetamine. Obviously, the chemicals going to the P2P route are difficult now to get into Mexico on the ports there. So we do find that some of it's being diverted into the countries below Mexico and through land-based routes brought up to them. So we did specifically address the training that went into the cultivation, extraction, and train them on the diversion of chemicals that would be necessary for the P2P route going into Mexico. We also train them on the air monitoring equipment and the decisions of go, no go into those atmospheres. South Africa, they had a conglomerate of a bunch of different compounds going on out there. And ironically, methcathinone was one of the bigger drugs they had being synthesized by a couple of different routes out there. One of their major tableting operations included Mandrex. And so again, we went through and profiled all those chemicals, the routes of synthesis, and the necessary processes that would go into those illegal clandestine operations. We trained these guys on what to look for, the hazards of it, and we spent a full day on fentanyl with these guys, since they are potentially going to be seeing some of the fentanyl coming through their way. These guys had very easy access on the black market to the larger scale chemicals. And so because of that, their laboratories were fairly large in nature out there. So again, what we did is we went in, we customized the training. We used the OSHA HAZWOPER 1910-120 standard as a best practice for most of these protocols developed for these guys. And then again, as we addressed each one of them, it's important that we covered the air monitoring that would be critical in their safety going into these sites. So the field guides, we left them in place. They're laminated. These guys have access to it. So all the training we gave them, they have cheat sheets, which are these field guides to take into laboratories with them. And then again, when we got out there, we, as much as possible, tried to do live methamphetamine cooks. We sent them through decon. We had them chemically identify unknowns. We had them take air monitoring samples. And then as practical measures of things that operations that they would do out in the field. So just kind of give you an idea of what we did, tried to do as much hands-on as possible, leaving them with laminated cheat sheets as we left, with the hope that we could come back and update these guys on new trends that might be hitting their country. So anybody got any questions? Otherwise, I will pass it back over to our moderator.
Да, огромное спасибо за предоставленную информацию. На самом деле,
Thank you very much for the information provided.
у нас в Республике Казахстан проводили
I would like to say again that you did visit us in Kazakhstan and that you conducted the training. So thank you very much again.
по теме
And also regarding the disposal, I would like to add something.
разрабатываем план
Today, we're working on a plan
на безвозмездной основе
where
субъектам
we study the possibility
веществ,
of providing precursors, different toxic substances for free to other industries. In other words, it's not going to be actual disposal. It's going to be transferring it, those chemicals and those precursors, to those production facilities that actually require them in their activities. We are currently working on a legislative framework for this process to happen. Does anybody have questions to any of our presenters? No questions. I apologize. There's another speaker there.
Yes, to follow up on that, we do have one more recorded presentation. Cyril, if you want to play that next, I think we can put that forward.
Hello, my name is Julian Huurne and I am the portfolio holder for training in the area of drugs trafficking at CEPOL. I'm pleased to introduce you to the EU approach to training on dismantling synthetic drugs laboratories, and I will do so in two steps. The first one will be that of covering the framework of training illicit drug production in EU, and secondly I will give some examples with regards to training activities, the resources that we use for those, and the media that we use to cover those resources. First, something about the framework. We have, of course, a training needs assessment that we get input from COSI, as well as from the EU Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment. Then there is MPACT, and MPACT stands for the European Multidisciplinary Platform Against Criminal Threats. And in this, which is very operational, we have operational priorities of cocaine, cannabis and heroin on the one hand, and synthetic drugs and NPS on the other hand, which very concretely provide us with input for the training needs assessment. Furthermore, there's the European Commission who provides us with input, as well as Europol, EMCDDA or the EU Drugs Agency, and Eurojust who provides us with input for the training needs. Finally, I would have to mention also the member states of the EU who provide us with that input, and then together the training needs are translated into an implementation plan of actual training in the area of cocaine, cannabis and heroin on the one hand and synthetic drugs and NPS on the other hand, yes indeed through MPACT. And through training actions, law enforcement and the judiciary is being professionalized within Europe. One action coming from the synthetic drugs and NPS priority is that of the participation in this global coalition. That's action number 8.3. Now, with regards to training and professionalization, I'd like to show you something about the 2024 training courses that we will organize. And the first course that I'd like to mention is that of the illicit drug laboratory dismantling course, and that's an advanced course. You see some footage over here as was shot. of the event that was held in 2023, so this year. And this course is for practitioners who are already working in the area of drug production and tackling drug production crime. A second course would be the follow-up to that course, and that is for those people who 2 years ago took the advanced course. So in 2024, it is for the people who took the 2022 advanced course. Next, there is the course Combating Drug Production Crimes through VR. VR in this case is used to safely learn how to enter a drug or suspected drug production site, as well as how drug production sites can be recognized. Dismantling of cannabis production and trafficking is a fourth course. The fifth one is Drug Crime and Markets, Strategic Analysis, as well as Drug Trafficking Methods, Mail and Postal Parcels. But for the sake of this presentation, the first three courses are most relevant. We do have one restriction though, and that is the limited reach of 35 officers that can be trained per course per year. We tackle this by introducing learning resources. These learning resources are in the shape of e-lessons. We call them e-lessons, and 10 titles are available in the series on illicit drug laboratories. Each of them are 60 minutes long in terms of study time. They can be used individually, also known as self-paced learning resources, or they can be used to be embedded in formal training courses by trainers or course managers. Each of these e-lessons are introduced with a so-called explainer video, and in this case you see an example of how that is explained about amphetamine production. These are 1.5 minute long videos. Furthermore, these videos and the e-lessons themselves are embedded into our learning management system, all in one category of illicit drug production, as you can find over here. And I will go into the one on MDMA, that's ecstasy. You find it over here. The introduction video is where we start, and then there is a virtual tour. Now the virtual tour can be seen full screen, and you can browse around the virtual tour through 360 degrees photos. And on these photos you find so-called hotspots. In this case you find the general description of MDMA. It can also be listened to, this description. We always focus also on safety measures, so that is one of the hotspots that you find on the first page of each of these series. And when you enter into the lab itself, you'll find and you can explore through the hotspots in a meaningful manner, in a context-rich manner, the content, the learning content with regards to illicit drug production. And for those who have completed the quiz for the e-lesson successfully, we issue certificates and badges. The advantages of these e-lessons is that we have a high reach of the target audience. So far in this year we have 1,575 users over the 10 e-lessons that we have alive at the moment. The content of the e-lessons is very meaningful and context rich. That means that all of the content is placed in an authentic learning environment. And the levels achieved in terms of critical thinking is remembering, understanding, applying of the knowledge, as well as analyze knowledge, even as far as to evaluate the knowledge. And we have a very high satisfaction rate of the users, which currently stands on 97.8% of the people who are happy, are pleased, or satisfied with the e-lessons as a whole. And it is supported by multiple media. The e-lessons can be viewed on a desktop or a laptop, even on mobile devices and virtual reality goggles. Let me demonstrate you how this VR works. You need goggles for this and you need your mobile phone. So if you open the virtual tour on your mobile phone, you see it as such. You can then also select the icon of the VR goggles at the top right corner, and the mobile phone needs to be turned over 90 degrees. Then you see the hotspots and the content of the hotspots as such, and you have to listen to the audio instead of reading. You can navigate through the different rooms of each of the illicit labs and browse through the hotspots of the content of the equipment, of the material that you find in the room. These are the goggles that we use. These are foldable cardboard goggles that if you prepare the mobile phone, set up the virtual tour and place that inside the goggles, you will be able to view the virtual tour through the goggles. This is rather immersive, and you will get a lot more impact of the learning. The effect of learning is much higher instead of using it by desktop or laptop alone. The titles that we have available in the series of illicit drug laboratories are amphetamine production, cannabis plantation, cocaine extraction and processing. We have drug waste dump sites, MDMA, small-scale or kitchen-style methamphetamine production, or large-scale methamphetamine production that's based on BMK and pressure reaction, new psychoactive substances, precursors, and tableting sites, and they are available free of charge for all EU law enforcement and judiciary officers through CEPOL's learning management system. Through testimonials, we learned what users think about these e-lessons. I'd like to share some of them with you. I was surprised to see that the e-lesson itself wasn't a simple boring course and was more like a real-time investigation, which means that we actually managed to achieve the context richness and authenticity of the drug laboratories. This is basic knowledge for a public prosecutor, but unfortunately it's not taught anywhere else, which means that we actually managed to reach and trigger a training need of a target audience that has not been triggered before. This Latvian colleague states that MPS are a real danger in my country, and this course will definitely help me in everyday duties in forensic analysis and helping law enforcement officers. In other words, this colleague mentioned that the knowledge and skills covered in the e-lesson is applicable for him. The use of the interactive search scene was excellent. I will use this type of interactivity in courses in which I'm an instructor, so it's not only relevant for practitioners but also for teachers and trainers. And with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention. I would like to hand the floor back to you, Andrew. Thank you.